Hi everyone, welcome to the Test 21 review. So we are going to be walking through every question from Test 21. Gotta make sure I've got my little pen working. So the protocol for this is that you really should have the assignment done already and then just look at this to check your work, or if you had a question about a particular one, feel free to scroll through and find that one. All right, so let's start with number 1. Divide $6.50 by 8 and round the quotient to the nearest cent. So let's make that into a long division. I'm just going to drop the dollar sign for right now, but we can add it back into our quotient. So remember, whenever you have a decimal in your dividend, you can just move it right back up into the quotient as long as the divisor doesn't have a decimal as well. So we can just get started. So 8 doesn't go into 6, we'll put a little 0 there. 8 goes into 65 8 times, so 8 times 8 is 64. We subtract and bring down our 0. 8 goes into 10 just once. 2, and remember, since we're after a decimal point, we can just carry down a 0 here. 8 goes into 20 twice. And if you look here already, it just says to round the quotient to the nearest cent. So remember, that just has to be to the nearest hundredth of a decimal point there. So the reason we go out to 3 decimals is to see whether or not we have to round up. And since the 1 is followed by a 2, 2's you don't have to round up. So the answer would be 0.81 or 81 cents. All right? So that's number 1. Number 2, 30% of the students in the class rode the school on the bus. So I'm going to say that, 30% on the bus. If 9 students rode the bus, how many were in the class? So what we need to do here is make a ratio box. So remember, that involves the ratio. Ooh, that's not how you spell that. It also involves the actual count. I'll just write AC. And then we have our different categories here. So we have the kids who rode the bus, the kids who did not ride the bus, and the total. This is a really rough ratio box, but just imagine with me that it's nice. So let's fill out the information we know. We know that 30% rode on the bus, and we also know that the actual count was 9 students. So with percents, we can sort of fill in the blanks because we know total was going to be 100%. If we know 30% of it, that means the people who did not ride would have been 70%. All right, so that's how you fill out the box to start. And then if you want to put in some variables here, so I put N for not on the bus and T for total. So look back at the question and find out what they're really asking you. They're asking you how many students were in the class. So they're asking you for the total. Remember, the other thing you do is you look for the row that's completely filled out, and that would be our top row here. So we're going to take those numbers out and create a proportion. So 30 over 100 equals 9 over T. So to solve a proportion, we have to cross multiply, but remember, one good step to do first is to simplify any of your ratios if you can. So 30 over 100 can become 3 over 10. So then let's cross multiply. We have 3t equals 90. How do we solve here? We would divide both sides by 3. So t equals 30. So there are 30 students total in the class. And that's the answer to number 2. All right, number 3. What are the coordinates of the point halfway between -2, 3 and 6, 3? So one of the easiest ways to solve this would be to just plot those points out. So get some graph paper, try to make it as neat as possible. Use those lines. Okay, that's the reason for these lines, is to make your graph neat and readable. Legible is the word there, but that's okay. So what I would do is I would plot these points. So we have -2, 3, and then we have 6, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so we're trying to find the halfway spot between these 2 points. So one of the easiest ways to do this, so you plot it and then just start counting how many spaces that is. So start at one of your dots. So we'll start here and then we start counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this segment is 8 spaces long. So what is half of 8? Of course, that's 4. So let's start at our starting point again and just count 4 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's 4 spaces from -2, 3 and 4 spaces from 6, 3. So now you just have to name that plot. So remember that points are always graphed x, then y. So look on your x-axis, you went over 2 spaces. Then look on your y-axis, we went up 3. So that halfway point is 2, 3. All right, so make sure you remember that on your test, that you're going to want to plot those points, and then find the halfway mark. Number 4, simplify. So we have 10 squared plus the square root of 9 plus 3 times 10. So of course here we've got a lot of different operations. We need to follow the order of operations. So remember that. If you ever forget it, just write it down on the side of your paper. So parentheses, exponents, multiplication and division as they occur from left to right, and addition and subtraction. So let's go through. No parentheses, we can cross that off. Any work with exponents also means we can do any square root problems. So we can do 10 squared right away and the square root of 9 right away. So just write out those problems. 100, carry down your plus sign. What's the square root of 9? It is 3. And honestly, just to keep yourself in order, I would just write out each step of the problem as you go. So don't let yourself get confused. Next is multiplication or division, and we only have one instance, and that is over here, 3 times 10, so that's 30. So 100 plus 3 plus 30, so that's done. Addition and subtraction as we go from left to right. So we're going to start with 100 and work our way down. 100 plus 3 is 103. 103 plus 30 is 133. So that's how you do that problem with order of operations. Next we have problem 5. It says how many 1 centimeter sugar cubes would it take to form this cube? So look at your cube there on your page, and I'll just draw a rough one here. All right, so it tells you that the height of this cube is 3 centimeters. So remember, what these questions really are asking for is volume, okay? So the volume of a cube, let me write it this way. The volume of a cube is the side cubed, so the length of one side cubed. The volume of a rectangular prism is going to be length times width times height. So you could really use either of these formulas when you're looking at a cube, because remember, that's just a 3-dimensional square. So we would say the volume of this cube, or the amount of sugar cubes needed, would be the length of the side cubed. So what is 3 times 3 times 3? It's 27. So the volume is 27 cubic centimeters, which means you need 27 sugar cubes to make it. All right, so another thing you can do is look at the cubes that it takes to make up one section of this cube. Look at these cubes here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 to make up one section. And we have 3 of those sections stacked together to make the cube. So 9 times 3 is 27. You see that again is another way how we get our answer there. All right, let's look at our next problem, number 6. What is the perimeter of this figure? So we've got one of these complex shapes where they give us some of the information and they don't give us the rest. So what we can do here first is determine these missing lengths. And this is in centimeters, by the way. You'll see that on your math sheet. I guess I'll just write it next to one of them. So let's find this length first. So 5 plus some length equals 10. So that means we can determine that this length is 5 centimeters. And then let's look at this one. This length plus 4 is going to equal 7. So this missing length is 3. And just remember, perimeter of any shape, whether it's complex or simple, if it's a square, a triangle, this crazy shape, all you have to do is add up the lengths of your sides. So what is 10 plus 4 plus 5 plus 3 plus 5 plus 7? And you would get 34 centimeters. So that's the answer to number 6. All right, let's start working on number 7 on this page too. It tells you the radius of a circle is 10 centimeters. And then we need to find the area. So I'm going to do the area problem, but I'm going to remind you as well the formula for circumference, because you might see that on your test. So the area of a circle, remember, is pi r squared, where pi, they tell us, is 3.14, and r represents the radius. Remember, circumference is pi times diameter, or 2 times pi times the radius. So just keep this one as a note. We're not going to use it for this problem, but you'll see it in the future. So let's take what they give us and plug it into the area formula. So the area is going to equal pi 10 squared. So what is 10 squared? It is 100. And actually, let me write 3.14 in here now instead. So what is 3.14 times 100? So remember, the great thing about multiplying by 100, 1000, 10 is that you can just move your move your decimal over for the number of zeros. So 3.14 times 100, we just move our decimal over and we get 314 centimeters. And because it's area, it's going to be squared. All right, or you could have written that out the long way. 100 times 3.14, we've gotten 31400, and it has 2 decimal places, so we move it over here, and you would have gotten the same thing the long way. All right, so the area is 314 centimeters squared. Let's move on to number 8. Half of a ton is how many pounds? So you need to remember that 1 ton is 2,000 pounds. So what is half of a ton going to be? It's going to be half of 2,000. So half of a ton is 1,000 pounds. Okay. Number 9, solve this proportion. 8 over 12 equals 12 over W. Now, one of the great things that you need to remember is before you solve proportions, it's going to be a lot easier if you reduce that proportion first. So let's reduce 8 over 12. What can that become? All right, so both of those numbers can be divided by 4. So 8 divided by 4 is 2. 12 divided by 4 is 3. So we'll really simplify this process. And then, as with any proportion, we will cross multiply to solve. All right, to find our unknown factor, remember you divide your product by your known factor. So that means we divide everything by 2. So W equals, what is 36 divided by 2? 18. All right, great job. Number 10, so this will be our halfway point. The ratio of boys to girls was 4 to 5. If there were 27 students, how many boys were there? So draw a ratio box for the problem. So let's set that up first. So we know we have ratio, we have actual count. All right, and then we also have boys, girls, total. All right, so remember to fill out the ratio part of this in the order it's given. So that says boys to girls is 4 to 5. So you need to write it out like that. If there were 27 students, how many boys were there? All right, so let's fill out what we can. One thing we can fill out is the total on the ratio side. 4 and 5 together would be 9. We can fill in the variables for what we don't know. And then to make our proportion, we have to choose the row that represents what we're looking for. We're looking for the amount of boys, and then choose the row that is completely filled out. And use those 2 rows to set up a proportion. So 4 over 9 equals B over 27. All right, so look at your situation there, look at your ratio, see if you can simplify that at all. If you cannot, then you start cross multiplying. So we have 4 times 27. 9 times B. Right, to solve for your unknown, you divide by your known. So 108 divided by 9 means that we have 12 boys in the class. 12 boys. All right. So hopefully this is all making sense to you so far. I just really hope you guys are enjoying your lessons, even though you're doing them from home. Some of you I know, and I'm sure, are just thriving. Some of you might need more help. Feel free to reach out anytime. So you'll notice numbers 11, 12, and 13 involve the fraction, decimal, percent box, where you just convert into those three categories. So this will be number 11, number 12, and number 13. So let's do number 11 first. They give you the fraction is 2 1/5. You need to find the decimal and the percent. So one thing that we can do to find the decimal, we've got a whole number, so it's going to be 2 point something. To figure out what decimal 1/5 is, we can divide. So we can do 1 divided by 5. So of course 5 doesn't go into 1, so we're going to have to make this a decimal number, a whole number with a decimal. How many times does 5 go into 10? 2, and no remainder. So 1/5 can be represented by 0.2. So that whole decimal will be 2.2. All right, 2.2. And then remember, simply enough, to turn these decimals into percents, you just move your decimal over 2 places. So that 2.2, I'll write it out here. We move over 2 places. So our percent is 220%. Okay, so that's for number 11. Number 12, we don't know the fraction. They tell us that the decimal is 0.7, which I'll save like that for now, and then we have to find the percent. So let's go to the easiest one. Well, actually, this one's pretty simple. When they give you the decimal, it's pretty simple. First of all, just read the decimal the way you're supposed to. We could also read this 7/10. We say it as the fraction already, 7/10. The only thing is, make sure you reduce, because if it were 5/10, that would reduce to 1/2. But in this case, 7/10 doesn't reduce, so we can just keep it. Then remember to go from decimal to percent. We move our decimal over 2 places, so that would become 70%. Okay, so that's number 12. Number 13, once again, we don't know the fraction. We do not know the decimal, but we do know the percent. So let's work totally backwards. When you know the percent, I'll write the percent out like this. You can determine what decimal it is by moving your decimal back to the left 2 spaces. So this decimal number is 0.05 or 5/100ths. Now, you surely heard me say 5/100ths. Let's write that out. That's our fraction. Reduce it if you can, okay? These can both be divided by 5. So 5 divided by 5 is 1. 100 divided by 5 is 20. So that gives us our fraction right away. Okay, so those are some quick ways to convert among fractions, decimals, and percents. And those were numbers 11, 12, and 13. All right, number 14 says to simplify. So we have 4.2 plus, in parentheses, 3 minus 1.75. So remember, order of operations, the first thing we do is this work in parentheses. And the best way to do that is to write it out in a column. Okay, because you can sort of make sure that you line things up, make sure you fill in the blanks with some zeros before you do your subtraction. Okay, so we can't do 0 minus 5, so let's borrow. This would become 10 and then become 9, and this 0 becomes 10. So 10 minus 5 is 5, 9 minus 7 is 2, carry down your decimal, and 2 minus 1 is 1. All right, so now the problem is 4.2 plus 1.25. Once again, the best way to do this work with decimals is to line them up vertically and make sure you line up your decimals. Okay, so let's add these columns: 0 plus 5, 2 plus 2, carry down your decimal, and 4 plus 1. All right, so you get the answer 5.45, excuse me. All right, number 15, we have -2 plus -3 minus -5. Okay, so this is probably some of the most challenging stuff on the test and maybe so far in your lessons, because I'm telling you, even like Algebra 2 students struggle with positive and negative numbers sometimes. So if you ever find that's the case for you, please just draw out a number line. It will really, really help you tremendously. Ooh, that was supposed to be a nice, beautiful line. It didn't really work all the way, so let's try that again. All right, so let's say this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Just to have a nice basis here. So we're starting at -2 on our number line, and we're adding a -3. So when you're adding a -3, remember that really means that you're going to be going backwards. So we're going to be going backwards 3 spaces, 1, 2, 3. So right now we're at -5. Okay, so we started at -2, we went backwards 3. Now the next step is to, so we've done this portion, is to subtract -5. When you subtract a negative, it's really like you're adding a positive. All right, so now you're going in the positive direction or to the right 5 spaces. So let's start at -5 and go to the right 5 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you end up at 0, and that's the answer to this problem, 0. Okay, if you have any struggles with positive and negative numbers, please let me know. 16. All right, so this is another one. We're going to use our order of operations. All right, so we want to do our work in parentheses first. So we have 12 hundredths divided by 6. So we don't need to worry about moving the decimal in our divisor. The decimal in our dividend can go right up into the quotient and just start your division. 6 doesn't go into 1, but it can go into 12 twice. All right, so now we've done that portion. So we have 12 hundredths times 2 hundredths. So one of the best ways to multiply with decimals is just to write out those numbers. And remember, in this case, they don't have to line up. I mean, they do, but they don't have to. And just multiply. So we've got 4, 2, next row, 0, 0. So you see we got 24. But remember, the last step is the most crucial, and that is to count up the amount of decimal places you see. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 decimal places. And then, okay, my battery died, so my screen is really, didn't die, obviously, because we're still working. Let me plug this in really quickly. Feel free to take a smidgen of a break. Pause the video while I grab my charger. I just don't want the screen to be this dark for you. That's not very easy to see. Actually, I don't know if it appears dark for you. Anyway. All right, we've got a lot of things going on right now. So count up your decimal places. We have 4, and then move your decimal over that many places. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Fill in those missing places with 0. So we ended up with 0, 0, 2, 4. So how would we say this? We would say 24 10,000ths. It's not a very fun fraction to read, but hey, that is the answer to number 16. All right, let's look at number 17, and I'm just going to work that one in the same exact place. 1 3/4 plus 1 2/3. Now remember the step to adding any fractions, whether they're mixed numbers or proper fractions, improper fractions, is that you want to have a common denominator. So our common denominator, look at these denominators. We have 4 and 3. Our common denominator is going to be 12. So I'm just going to set those up right now. So, sorry, those loud dirt bikes. I don't know if you guys can hear them. To get from 4 to 12, we multiply by 3. So we do the same thing to our numerator. 3 times 3 is 9. To get from 3 to 12, we multiply by 4. So do the same thing to our numerator, and we would get 8. So then add your whole numbers, 1 plus 1. Then add your fractions, 9/12 plus 8/12. Remember, when you're adding or subtracting, you only add or subtract the numerators. So 9 plus 8 is 17. And you'll see here right away that 17 over 12 is an improper fraction. So let's turn that into a proper fraction. 12 goes into 17 once, with 5 left over. So 17 over 12 becomes 1 5/12. And you just want to add that to our original whole number. So 2 plus 1 is 3. So 3 5/12. All right, let's keep going. We are on number 18. We have 8 1/3. Let me write 18 times 1 4/5. Now with multiplying fractions, if you have mixed numbers, change them into improper fractions first. So 3 times 8 plus 1 would give us 25 over 3. Times 5 times 1 plus 4 is 9 over 5. All right, so this is straight up multiplication. This isn't a proportion. We're not cross multiplying anymore. But what we can do, I really butchered this multiplication sign, is reduce between our numerators and denominators. So 3 and 9, 3 would reduce to 1. Oh, that wasn't supposed to be there. And 9 reduces to 3. And then 5 and 25, 5 reduces to 1, 25 reduces to 5. So remember, with multiplication, you multiply across the numerators and then across the denominators. So 5 times 3 over 1 times 1. So simply 15 is your answer there. All right, number 19. This one has an extra step because now we're doing division. So 2 and 2/5 divided by 1 and 4/5. So the first steps are the same. Change these to improper fractions. So 5 times 2 plus 2. And let's just write this out. Well, let's not do too much at once. 5 times 1 plus 4 is 9, so it becomes 9 over 5. So remember, when you are dividing fractions, you multiply by the reciprocal. So your first fraction stays the same, division becomes multiplication, and your second fraction flips to be the reciprocal. Okay? So it's very important that you know to keep the first fraction the same, otherwise you will get the wrong answer. All right? So when we go to multiply, remember you can reduce first. So our 5s cancel. 12 and 9. Actually, let's just do this. 12 over 9. These are both, you can reduce both of these by 3. So it would become 4 over 3. And 4 over 3, you might want to write that as a mixed number, 1 and 1/3. All right, and let's look at our last problem of the day. We have this parallelogram. All right. You know what, mine's not going to look exactly like the one, but I'll do the same dimensions. It'll be okay. So this is 6 centimeters. This is 12 centimeters. And the height they give us is 10 centimeters. So this says, what is the area of the shaded part of the parallelogram? So you don't even need to know the area of the whole parallelogram, just the shaded part. And you'll notice that the shaded part makes a triangle. So remember, you need to remember the area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. Okay, so all we have to do is go through and fill out the information. The base of this triangle would be 6 centimeters. And remember the height, it isn't this slanted line, it's always the perpendicular line. So the line drawn perpendicular from the base. So it's going to be 10 in this case. So 1/2 times 6 is 3. 3 times 10 is 30. We're dealing in centimeters, and it's because it's area, it's going to be centimeters squared. All right, so that's the answer to number 20. I hope that helped you guys out. If you had any questions over this, and hopefully it just reaffirmed that you were doing things correctly. So that test is scheduled for tomorrow, but if you have any questions before then, let me know. Or if you need to take the test later in the week, let me know. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that.